Well, US President Donald Trump briefly spoke about Iran talks to reporters from the White House, and he said, "We're close to maybe making a deal. We're going to make a deal or finish the job. I'd rather make a deal. We could knock out their energy supply," again, making those threats that if there isn't a deal, then they're willing to escalate things again with Iran. So I think, in terms of the language from the White House, you're hearing things that you've heard before. In terms of actually on the ground in the peace talks and the negotiations that are underway, look, I think observers are saying that this funeral is really part of Iran's show of unity, given that there clearly will be differing views on the state of the negotiations and how to proceed with negotiations with the United States. And it's a chance to present a united front for Iran as they go into talks where there are still significant disagreements with the United States, notably on whether there should be tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, the route that ships should take, in these talks, these narrow technical talks, whilst Qatar and Pakistan said that positive progress has been made, publicly both sides are clearly indicating there are still some differences of opinion on some of those key issues.
And look, in which direction are we moving here? Is the nuclear issue any closer to the table, or is Hormuz and frozen assets still dominating here?
Well, I think given what we understand from the talks that have just ended, the round of talks, Hormuz and frozen assets were clearly front and center of the negotiations, and that nuclear talks was not something that was going to be addressed until these other issues were raised. Remember, the issue of Lebanon and its role in the peace settlement is also something that Iran is keen to address, and was something that we understand from reporting that was touched upon. What we are understanding from the next round, from reporting in Pakistan, is that the nuclear issue could be addressed in the next phase, whenever that happens, which we understand to happen as soon as possible after the funeral of the late Ayatollah of Iran has finished.
Does Washington see today's dissolution announcement as a real breakthrough, or just Hamas managing, let's call them, optics?
Yes, this is, of course, the dissolution announced by Hamas of its government in the Gaza Strip. We understand that the committee, the overseeing management, has been dissolved as they proceed to a transition to a UN-backed committee. But we also understand that a lot of its staff remains in place to implement the day-to-day management of the territory. So as a result of that, it's not really clear how much change there will be on the ground if the staff remain in place. But this is clearly part of the deal that the US backed, the US helped to strike the dissolution of Hamas governing in the Strait. So there is at least to some extent some change in the in the posturing from Hamas. But as we've just discussed, it's not clear what happens next and whether that really means any meaningful change on the ground as of yet.
And Jagruti, does this bring Board of Peace any closer to becoming operational?
Well, the Board of Peace has reacted to this, and it says that we have taken note of the announcement today regarding the dissolution of the Emergency Committee in Gaza. This is a post on X. And it says, "Ultimately, our assessment will be guided by actions, not promises, to meet the critical needs of the people in Gaza." So really, it all depends on what happens next. It's not just the dissolution of Hamas as an administrative power in Gaza, but it's also there are calls in this peace agreement for the disarmament of Hamas, which it has rejected. It says it won't disarm until Israel stops attacking in the Gaza Strip, and that has not yet happened. Israel is not making any promises to leave the Gaza Strip. So those things are still on hold. And as a result, it's been very difficult for the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, which is a US-backed group of Palestinian technocrats, to start its implementation. There's a sort of a peacekeeping force that is also part of the plan to take over in Gaza. That as we understand, has not yet been able to establish itself in the territory. So there still seems to be a fair way to go for that, for much of the progress to be made. But this is, as I say, at least something that is different. As you say, for the last 20 years, Hamas has been ruling in the Gaza Strip, and now they are saying that they have taken steps, at least to dissolve the government, even if the staff currently remain in place. There is some difference there.
Well, thank you, Jagruti, for joining us here, and thanks for the updates.